When we think about the ancient world, there are a lot of mysteries, a lot of things that are unexplained, just as there are a lot of unexplained phenomena today, from strange lights in the sky, to psychic experiences, to remote viewing, where people can seemingly see into the future. Do we assume similar things were not experienced thousands of years ago? Are we to assume that ancient people never had such encounters, never reported such experiences? Isn't it also true that so many of the tales of old that have been considered pure myth actually have some factual basis behind them, from the siege of Troy to the lost city of Atlantis? What about all the gods and goddesses of ancient mythology? If the ancients had had some kind of encounter with beings from another dimension or another world, don't you think they would have depicted them as gods and goddesses? Let's face it, the biblical world is chock full of mysteries that people miss when they're just looking at it as religion. So let's go back in time. Let's flash back to the ancient Near East. There's a young Israelite named Ezekiel who's been sent away into exile. He's living in Babylonia in a place identified as Tel Aviv, and he's in anguish about the fate of his people. Suddenly, he has a vision. The heavens are torn apart. He has an encounter with another world that we can only describe as alien. And even biblical scholars agree that he's emphasizing just how alien the divine world has become. Now, when we say alien, we don't necessarily mean beings from another planet. We don't know what they are. We're just told that they are out there. He says he saw visions of God.
The heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. As I looked, behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, and a great cloud, with brightness round about it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire, as it were, gleaming bronze. And from the midst of it came the likeness of 4 living creatures. Now as I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel upon the earth beside the living creatures, one for each of the 4 of them. As for the appearance of the wheels and their construction, their appearance was like the gleaming of a chrysolite, and the 4 had the same likeness, their construction being as it were, a wheel within a wheel. When they went in any of their 4 directions without turning as they went. The 4 wheels had rims and they had spokes, and their rims were full of eyes round about. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went beside them, and when the living creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose. Wherever the Spirit would go, they went, and the wheels rose along with them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Over the heads of the living creatures there was the likeness of a firmament, shining like crystal, spread out above their heads. And above the firmament over their heads there was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like sapphire, and seated above the likeness of a throne was a likeness as it were, of a human form. And upward from what had the appearance of his loins I saw as it were, gleaming bronze, like the appearance of fire enclosed round about, and downward from what had the appearance of his loins I saw as it were, the appearance of fire, and there was brightness round about him. Like the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud on the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about.
Many readers of this mysterious account imagine that the prophet must have been confronted by some kind of alien craft from another world, an extraterrestrial encounter complete with ancient aliens. UFO researchers actually point to Ezekiel as documentary evidence of extraterrestrial contact. And when we look honestly at the passage, we've got a series of images that do look like some kind of ET. A glowing cloud with a gleaming metallic object inside. 4 non-earthly beings. Crystalline wheels beside them with a gyroscope-esque aura, a wheel within a wheel. Levitation. A vehicle or chariot, some kind of celestial throne, an inexplicable force or power, a stormy wind, fiery propulsion. But there are yet other ways to think of all this. Notice how many times he says, as it were, like, and likeness. Reading it in the Hebrew, the prophet isn't actually saying that he saw any of these things with his own eyes. Instead, he may be hinting that what he had was more a psychic experience than a physical encounter. That's what mysticism is about. That's what the ancient discipline called Kabbalah is about. It's about what we would call altered states of reality. Maybe the prophet Ezekiel is trying to let us in on experiences he had while in some kind of meditative trance. His extrasensory encounter may have been real enough to him, though unseen by anyone else. Maybe we ought to be talking seriously about interdimensional encounters experienced down through history. That brings us deeply into our own inner life, and that brings us right back to the study of the so-called chariot throne of God, known in Hebrew as the Merkavah. And we can rightly call Merkavah mysticism the earliest form of Kabbalah. Some serious researchers think that entering such altered states can put us in touch with a completely different dimension of the universe. For example, there's the multi-dimensional visitation hypothesis, which asserts that when people enter altered states of consciousness, they access completely different dimensions of reality. It's in those exact situations that we find accounts of ETs, angels, and otherworldly beings. The idea is that certain states are conducive to experiencing these entities or intelligences beyond our own world, and that humans are naturally inclined to project forms or shapes common to their own belief systems onto these non-terrestrial entities. And that brings us right back to the study of Kabbalah, or Cabala.
Now, at the heart of Kabbalah is an essential universal question, and that is, how can infinite eternal reality, whose essence is beyond the grasp of mere mortals, be known intimately? How can the eternal, who is completely other and beyond space and time, be intimately involved with the material world and with us as part of it? The problem is how to establish a link, or perhaps even experience a oneness or unity with this infinity. Perhaps knowingly, perhaps unknowingly, Ezekiel had opened a door to a whole new world, an unseen realm, rarely glimpsed even in the Hebrew Bible. It was a world of special revelations and divine encounters experienced in mystical states of semi-trance. It was a world of dreams and visions, of heightened awareness of the supernatural universe.
Think about it. If someone living in the pre-technological age were to witness what we might call non-terrestrial beings or extraterrestrial craft of some kind, or a bright light in the sky, wouldn't they describe it in religious terms, either as God or an angel or a troop of angels? And Ezekiel wasn't the only one. Looking back 2,500 years ago, we find generation upon generation of what we might call a biblical counterculture, who would explore this link with the world of spirit, fostering a whole category of literature called apocrypha. The word apocrypha is the plural form of the Greek apokryphon, meaning hidden. It's all about hidden things, secrets that can even be called occult. Apocrypha consists of a mini library of books composed in the first 2 centuries before the Common Era, most of which never made it into the accepted canon of Holy Writ. The writers of these 2 centuries, following in the footsteps of Ezekiel, tell of many deeply mystical experiences. The beginnings of this mystical trend, taking inspiration from Ezekiel's chariot throne, the Merkavah, can be traced to the same period. The authors are unknown, but serious biblical scholars refer to them as the visionaries. And like all mystics, they were looking for something beyond themselves. And that again brings us face to face with the discipline, and we can even call it the science of Kabbalah.
We visionaries were an assortment of ancient Israelite priests, tracing our lineage all the way back to Moses himself. But trouble arose when the Israelites were returning from faraway exile in Persia in the 6th century BCE. The newly rebuilt temple was ruled in those days by a corrupt and power-hungry priestly caste from the lineage of Moses' brother Aaron. They pushed aside all other claimants to their power, including the priestly descendants of Moses. So our marginalized Moses clan, the visionaries, cultivated spirituality. We began to have dreams, visions, and revelations in which the heavens were opened and a host of spiritual beings were presented to us.
It makes perfect sense that in an environment like that, people would be drawn to visions of the world beyond and to hope centered on the end of days. It makes sense that these visionaries would cultivate the disciplines of meditation and metaphysics that would become the foundation of Kabbalah, and that not a few of them would enter altered states of consciousness and become perfect subjects for what some UFO researchers would call multi-dimensional visitation. This concept of Merkava involved creating the equivalent of an astral vehicle in which the soul could leave the body and travel through different worlds. In modern metaphysics, it's a practice known as astral projection, enabling the practitioner to go in and out of the body via the soul and travel to other astral planes and quantum realms through focused meditation, deep breathing, and holding different yoga-like positions. Taking a cue from ancient Merkava mysticism, astral projection is a practice that everyone from wandering shamans to the US military have been known to use. In 1983, the CIA published the Gateway Report, a mind-bending document about military research into out-of-body experiences and other dimensions.
But there's a danger, since, as Kabbalists have taught, untrained minds that enter the so-called orchard of mysticism without proper discipline may suffer devastating consequences. As the great ancient sage Rabbi Akiva related, 4 of us went into the paradise. 1 looked and died. 1 looked and was smitten. 1 looked and became apostate. Only I entered in peace and came out in peace.
There are in fact case studies on astral projection, indicating that some have experienced multiple mental issues after engaging in the practice. And again we ask, on another level, did the authors of these ancient texts use such practices to experience close encounters with some kind of non-terrestrial entities? Were their visions sheer flights of fancy, just figments of their imagination? Or might they have involved a class of entities that we do not understand at all? Interdimensional beings who defy the laws of physics and seem to defy the fabric of space-time itself. There's also a messianic element which abounds in these curious texts. The idea of a deliverer who will come to set things straight, especially a supernatural kind of deliverer, isn't just a biblical concept, but is common to cultures around the world. In ancient Israel, the messianic idea began with the simple concept of someone who will renew and restore the throne of King David, a very human type of king. But at some point, that idea morphed into a purely transcendent being, perhaps an interdimensional being, linked in its imagery with the divine figure of Ezekiel's famous vision. We can't say whether the image of the Messiah of Jewish and Christian tradition evolved from encounters with non-terrestrials or ETs, but we should pay attention to the commonalities between extraterrestrial archetypes from antiquity down to the present, crossing religious and cultural boundaries and spanning the very fabric of time. There's so much more to come.